Journalism is what is required to make democracy work. This is a quote by Walter Cronkite. This is most definitely true. Journalism is something I believe in so much, I even studied it as my university undergrad. My next guest is a leading journalist and news anchor in BC. Aaron McArthur is a senior journalist with Global News, British Columbia. And in this episode, we discuss his journey into journalism, his work covering important stories in 2025 while the news landscape has changed, and where he thinks it's going. This is an absolutely amazing discussion that you must tune in for. And even more than that, it's important to remember the value of journalism that I fear many will not realize until it's too late. Journalists keep those in power accountable. They inform us. They let us know about what's happening in our community, both hyper-locally and beyond. Journalism matters. It's important to support it in any way that you can. I'm excited to welcome my next guest, senior journalist and news anchor for Global News BC. Aaron McArthur is coming up next on Rachel Thexton Connects.
Okay, so this morning on the podcast, I am thrilled to welcome a veteran journalist. Anyone who has consumed news in this province knows of my next guest. He is a news anchor and a journalist with Global News BC. I'd love to welcome today Aaron McArthur. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Thrilled to have you here. Journalism is something I studied, never pursued, wasn't up to it. I couldn't do the job, got to be honest. So went over to the dark side of PR, but working with you off and on for well over a decade, you're really you are a staple name in everyone's household when it comes to news in this province. And I wanted to kind of get to know you a little bit better, because of course you're always telling the stories of others and sharing news with others within BC. So can we talk a little bit about your 23-year career with Global News BC and what it was like being Aaron McArthur growing up, where you studied and kind of what your pursuit was? Was it always journalism? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. 23 years. You make me sound old. Born and raised in British Columbia. I spent 2 years living in Saskatchewan for my career, but I always like to boast that I've lived all my life west of the Rockies, which isn't really a badge of honor, but it is home, and I do love it here. Grew up kind of small towns all over BC. My dad was in the mining business. We lived in tiny places like Grand Isle, but I did most of my high school in a place called Fernie in the East Kootenays.
Yeah.
And I was, always interested in current affairs, always interested in politics and history and geography and things like that. So I went to university in Victoria, tried to do a political science degree, tried to get into law school, really.
Okay.
That didn't happen, probably through my own fault more than anything. And I just, journalism was always something we were interested in at home and watching the news and reading the news. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And then I got into BCIT in 1997, spent 2 years at BCIT and then 2 years in Saskatchewan as a journalist to cut my teeth. And then I got hired at BCTV, BCTV then in 2001. And so I've been there ever since.
And news. So that's the reason I chose journalism, was just because I imagine you enjoy this, but tell me if I'm wrong, being able to kind of be involved in anything and everything related to what's happening in the world. Was that an appeal for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That idea of being a fly on the wall, having fingers in all of these pies, like looking at history as it's made or important events as they happen, has always been really one of the highlights for me. And really the stories I remember most are the things that have shaped this province over the last quarter century.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm in the same boat as you. I write how many years I've been working in the industry with pride on proposals, but then when I'm sharing it amongst friends, I kind of try to minimize the the years a little bit. So why broadcast news over another format? So why not, go and try to write news with the Vancouver Sun or a magazine? Why broadcast? What drew you to that?
Well, the joke in the industry is that TV reporters can't write, so
Oh,
maybe that falls in my wheelhouse. I certainly can't spell, so that works out really well. But like growing up, newspapers just didn't have any. There was great writers and great newspapers in the 80s. Like, don't get me wrong, and that was I always enjoyed reading, you know, the really giants in the news industry from the paper side of things. But I remember as a kid just being entranced with TV news. Like in the 80s, TV news was like in its golden age. There was like in BC, we had Jack Webster, Tony Parsons, the reporters, John Daly, Brian Coxford, these huge names that were just like they were the trusted names in BC. And then you look nationally or internationally, Peter Mansbridge, Peter Jennings, and that really appealed to me. Barbara Walters, that really appealed to me. And I just thought the idea of being right there in the heart of it with a camera sounded appealing.
yeah.
And there's always a little bit of ego involved. It's like, oh, hey, look at that. Those people are famous. Maybe I could do that too. So
Yeah.
that's less so the reality, but certainly when you're an impressionable student, it seemed the thing to do.
Sure. Well, I mean, but some people, myself, for example, it took my husband 3 years to convince me to even start this podcast because putting my mouth on a mic and speaking and knowing people are listening made me shake. So you must have, I mean, did you ever have those big nerves thinking about being in front of the camera and, being on the spot? You do live, I'm sure you've done live segments in the past.
Oh, I'll tell you a funny story. I still remember this. This is 25 years ago. I still remember this. I was an intern. I was at BCIT. I got an internship at City News, which was then called Global, at the station down on West Second in Vancouver. And they
Okay.
did these news cut-ins. They were a minute long, and they cut to the newsroom, and some kid would read the highlights of the last 4 or 5 hours, or 2 or 3 hours. And so the producer said, "Okay, you got to go do this." And I remember sitting down, plugging in, and then I remember standing up and unplugging. I don't remember the minute that happened. It was a complete blackout.
So you
It
just
was
had,
just, it was terrifying.
yeah.
It was terrifying. And I don't know, I still get jittery when we do live hits. I'm not a person who kind of has all of his thoughts collected and able to push out in one coherent sentence or two coherent sentences. So I find I have to really be prepared and know what's coming, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to present it, and then that way I can, do I hope a decent job. But no, there's a performance aspect to it, and it's not always comfortable. Sometimes it's less comfortable than others.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you that whenever I've seen you on site at interviews, you always seem very calm. But on the second note, I think, I would imagine that when you stop feeling those nerves, perhaps there's really, I don't know, maybe your passion for what you're doing is creeping away from you. So the nerves are probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's high energy. If you're at a forest fire or a
Hmm.
crime scene, or something like that, and there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot going on, and it's high energy, and we have the duty and the obligation to get it right. So there's always pressure to do right by our viewers, to be truthful, to be accurate, and to do all of that, and still try to be calm and present a story to the public. There's a lot in it, and it can be challenging sometimes, or a lot. It's challenging a lot of times.
Yeah, no, not an easy job. I don't think the average person knows really what goes into it. And I can tell you just by, being on site many times and it is you're multitasking and you're a human being clearly. So there's emotions involved there. about the story, perhaps about what's happening, but presenting that balanced view of things. When you're covering a story, how do you balance your emotions as a human being with presenting a balanced story? That was my biggest obstacle in studying. I was really unable to do that. And how do you do that, Aaron? If you're at this point where you're really becoming, and I'm sure you try not to do this, but emotionally invested to even a little bit, how do you stay balanced?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, the notion that journalists are unbiased, I think is wrong. I mean, we have our opinions, we have our political views, we have our issues that are important to us, and we have to bring that to the interviews we do. We have to bring that to the stories we do. I always view what I do as trying to be detached from my views. The story's not about me. The story's about other people. It's about other issues. So I always try to put my views on the back burner and ask questions that I think other people would like to know. Present a story that is balanced, and only in the fact that I'll act as a foil to everyone I talk to. A politician says something, I'm going to push back on that. If there's somebody on the street who says something, you push back on it. You challenge them on what they've said. And as long as you're constantly challenging people on what they are presenting to you, you can take that sort of backseat, third party view, arm's length view, and present a story that is hopefully accurate, hopefully truthful, and try to get to the heart of what's at stake here.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the biggest things about journalism that I think is just such a vital component of keeping the wheels turning in our society is accountability, right? Is keeping those who have, positions of power accountable. Is that a big, part of your, the pride in what you do as a journalist, is really ensuring that that piece of accountability, you do your part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, as we've seen lately, it's harder and harder for journalists to do, for organizations to do. But yeah, and that's what journalism has been about for the last 150 years in this country, and hopefully that's what we can keep doing, is holding people to account when they need to be held to account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I've spoken with other journalists on the podcast about this topic, my opinion has always been that, although there's been shifts and very unfortunate downsizing in the newsrooms, that, we it can't stay this way and it can't continue to go that way because this digital sharing is not news. We absolutely have to have professionals in place who know the process, who are educated in the craft of journalism, to gather and present those stories in a way that allow the public to decide which side they're on versus whoever wants to pick up the mic like myself and share, because I don't claim to be a journalist clearly, but what are your thoughts on how things have changed in your time in the newsroom? I mean, I started in PR when we were still faxing media hits to clients, so there I aged myself. How have things changed with the downsizing and the constant evolution of digital?
Yeah, it's gotten quicker, hasn't it? More
Yeah.
more recently, the changes. I mean, the technological changes from when I started to now are just enormous. I mean, look, we're talking like this on a podcast that we couldn't do that 5 years ago, and now actually a good chunk of what I do is internet based on
Yeah.
Zoom or just internet. The internet's changed everything in terms of our gathering, but in terms of downsizing and digital, the rise of digital news. I mean, like, people still want to watch TV. People still want to read newspapers or get their information from somewhere, and somebody has to provide it. It's just a question now of how do we pay for it? It
Mm-hmm.
costs money to make news. It costs money to pay people to get the technology out there to fact check, to gather. And so that's the question now. It's not so much the information that's out there, because as you know, there's just nothing but information out there. who picks up the tab to pay for it is really the question, and really the question we're struggling with as an organization at Global anyway.
Hmm. Hmm. I notice a difference in working with, a variety of TV networks across the country, that when you show up on site from Global News BC, you seemed really well equipped. I mean, you always have, someone with you, a cameraman with you, or a camerawoman. You always, have, it seems like you're there with the tools that you need and someone there to support you. Whereas sometimes, I feel for the people showing up on site on their own, camera on the back, you can tell that they're trying to do the job of two or three people. So that's, certainly fortunate to be working with Global as, number one news provider in the province, I suppose.
We are incredibly fortunate. The cuts to newsrooms across the country in our city have been, devastating. I look at colleagues who work at other places, and it's really disheartening. We are incredibly fortunate. We still have a really sizable audience. People trust us, and they continue to turn on the news, or now turn on the internet. We have a deal with Amazon Prime, I believe, so our content gets produced on some channels outside conventional broadcasting as well. But our management, our ownership has been committed to TV news, well, just news in general. I mean, we're online as well. Committed to news, committed to information programming, and and continue to increase our programming, not just slash and burn. We've had some layoffs recently. The advertising side of the equation is a little tougher than it has been,
Yeah.
but we keep pushing forward. I mean, our content is what separates us from everyone else, and we're proud of that.
Yeah, no, and you should be. And I mean, my opinion is that your content certainly does, but it's also the journalists gathering and reporting and delivering that content. So, a person such as yourself, as a veteran journalist, kept on as a senior leader in the newsroom, I think is vital. People have come to trust you over many years. They see your face, they hear your voice. There's a level of trust. There's, even though you may not know them, they feel as though they know you. You know what I mean? Kind of like, so you're listening to morning radio and feeling like know the hosts. As a senior journalist in the newsroom, I imagine you have a bit more flexibility on the stories that you choose to cover, which when I spoke with Lori Colbert at The Sun, she talked about that being one of the biggest, benefits of being a veteran journalist, is having a little bit more wiggle room and choosing your stories. Is that true? And if so, what kind of stories really are you drawn to when you look at your day ahead or the week ahead and really think, what's on my plate this week?
I will tell you that one of the things I like the most about my job is the endless variety of it. I've never had a beat per se. I'm not but I will go to court. Like, I'm not a court reporter, but I can go to court. I'm not a crime reporter, but I can cover a murder scene if I had to. I'm not a business reporter, but I can cover economic stories. That to me is what keeps the job interesting. It's
Yeah.
always different every day, and I love that. I love being able to just get up and just take on whatever the desk assigns me, or whatever I'm interested in that day. I will say that lately I've been really drawn to like health and science stories. It's what I listen to when I'm listening to a podcast. I love Radio Lab and stories that have like really cool content that's just interesting. And so those are the stories I actually really want to tell right now, like health and wellness, or science and tech, and those kinds of things. Those don't happen very often for me.
Yeah.
Just the nature of local news. We have
Yeah.
to kind of cover what's going on. But yeah, that's if I had my choice, that's what I might just do space stories, like science and tech stories for the next 10 years. But that's not going to happen.
I think the health piece is really important. I think people really feel like they're missing that a little bit in their news, and it's so important. I think it's undervalued to some degree.
Mm.
My husband likes this neurodiverse, no, not neurodiversity. It's that is one that he listens to, but it's based on the brain, and just it's this specialist who really talks about the structure of the brain and how it works. And obviously the brain being something that we know very little about compared to the rest of elements of health. So yeah, I suppose it would be great for you if, someone in BC was, leading in that space and you were able to kind of weave them into stories or, something related to tech, which happens, I'm sure sometimes, maybe not as much as you would like it to, but interesting. So science, tech, health kind of really, is that because you're, forward thinking and just looking at kind of really what you think listeners would enjoy hearing about or seeing?
It's what I enjoy listening to. So it's what
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to. Like I love talking to scientists and researchers. I mean, I'll do an interview and I'll talk to them for 25 minutes and use 2 minutes on the air. I
Yeah.
just find it interesting. So I mean, those are the things that I would do more of if I could.
Okay.
But that being said, like this is being recorded in early February. It's Trump's tariffs. I mean, that's the only thing people are talking about, and so we have to do that. Or the election, provincial election, or the upcoming federal election, we have to do that. And so,
Yeah.
we do that, and then if there's a chance to do some interesting, quirky stories on the side, that's always good too.
Yeah. I imagine that certain stories are more exciting to cover than others, and some are pretty tough. What kind of story excites you? I think you kind of answered that a little bit just now, but and what kind of stories, as a journalist in your career, have you found to be the toughest to cover?
Honestly, the most exciting stories are usually the toughest to cover.
Mm.
The adrenaline, that sort of adrenaline rush when something happens and you have to go cover it, because that's the advantage of TV news. We're immediate. We just do it right now. So, I think to the summertime when we have major forest fires, that's exciting to cover. It's we have to get there. It's go, 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 go. And that's fantastic. It's just so engaging. It's like, let's go. Let's be first. Let's be right. Let's do it. But then, people lose their homes.
Yeah.
People lose their livelihoods. Communities are gone. That's hard. It's difficult. And these are difficult things that happen to people. And so it's a real it's a really strange place to live in. While we're excited to do it, we have to be empathetic to the people that we're covering, and it's a tough balancing act. It's a tough line to walk. And
Hmm.
over the years, I hope we've done right by people, but I leave that up to them to judge.
Yeah, it makes me think of journalists themselves. You, Aaron, you're witness to some of the most exciting and brilliant and fantastic things, but you're also witness to some of the most horrific things. And that would take a toll after a while, on anyone. Uh, have you ever had those days where you just think that this world is just wow, and just having to escape in whatever way you do via time with your family, or do you have those days?
Yeah, it's I think 10 years ago we wouldn't talk about this, but it does take a toll. And having access to someone to talk to about some of the issues at work has been really helpful for me.
Hmm.
It's yeah, it can be challenging, but as I said earlier, just kind of detaching myself from the job has been sort of the easiest and best way to cope with it. I think we don't. There's what I do 10 to 6 every day, and then try to leave that at work,
Yeah.
and that's I've gotten. Yeah, there's been times where I haven't done that and been really miserable for it,
Yeah.
but as of late, it's been better. During COVID, it was hard. I mean, everything was COVID. Everything was pandemic related, and it just you couldn't do anything without thinking about work, and it was really hard. But yeah,
Yeah.
having someone to talk to, and just the old war stories of journalists who go to the bar and drink away their sorrows is not it's not fiction. That really happened, and now it's a much more progressive business to be in, and people's mental health is taken seriously.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if people realize that history of journalism, but it's kind of this, within the industry and in the space, journalists, who were covering tough beats there was high rates of alcoholism in the industry back in, I don't know when it was, would have been kind of more in the 70s, 60s, 70s. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that that there's those supports there in the newsroom. Related to COVID, and the division. I've talked about this on the podcast a lot. It's just so much division than we've ever had before. And now, hopefully, we're coming together as a country. Is the silver lining, I would hope, of these Trump tariffs is that we can come together and really see who we are as a country. But there is definitely a lot of negativity, hot button topics. People are really polarized. And this spilled over to journalists, this whole fake news idea, which, how many, I always train my clients never to get into online disputes with people. It's just not worth it. And then here I was, defending journalists and this whole notion of fake news. But I would imagine that you would have run into some tough situations with people out on the streets, covering beats, and they're fewer of them, but they're loud. Usually, the ones who are going to be unkind and unfair. And did you encounter that during the times of COVID? And how was that for you?
The odd time people have yelled at me, but not too often. I know it happened a lot to colleagues of mine who got stuck in anti-mask protests and anti-mandate protests and things like that. I every once in a while, but it's part and parcel of the job. I mean, some people don't enjoy what we do and like to voice their opinion about it, which is fine. I'm fully capable of accepting their criticism.
Mm-hmm.
The whole COVID thing, the whole division thing stems from what we were talking about earlier, the online access to information that is not verified, is not vetted, it's not checked. People and the algorithms, of course, just feed people what they want to read or see, and
Yeah.
that can be dangerous. So it's it just makes me think we need what journalists provide more than anything. So
Mm-hmm.
like I said, water off a duck's back, or it becomes a long day.
Yeah, you have to have a bit of a thicker skin. It's becoming more clear to me why journalism was a path that I steered away from in the end, although I was very passionate about it. Many of my listeners are in the professional space, and my clients will sometimes come to me with stories that I know clearly aren't appropriate for TV news or for news in general. They may be amazing stories to share as digital content, and they're clearly proud of what they're doing. But there's a line between what is news and what is just cool information to share. What makes the cut for you in a TV news story? So when you receive those, I don't even want to know how many email ideas you receive daily. My story, you got to cover this. This is so interesting, and I'm sure a couple of them the odd time come from me. I hope they're not too offline. But what jumps out at you when you receive a story idea? And, what kind of pitches when you see right away, or story angles do you jump at?
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking about call them feature stories, or non-urgent stories, and that's there's a difference between what we do in terms of urgent coverage and things that we can fill the show out, is what we call them, or important stories that need to be told.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to be visually interesting. I can't tell you how many pitches we get that are, we have this great idea, and my questions are, what are we going to see? What are we going to hear? And PR professionals have no idea. Like, I'm sorry, I hadn't thought of that. Well, that's not going to make the cut.
Yeah.
If it's first in Canada, first in the world, newest, those things are what people are interested in, right? That water cooler kind of conversation. Those are things that are going to make TV news. And sometimes it just has to be timely.
Yeah.
It has to be what people are going to be interested in. And that timeliness can sometimes go awry. It's like there's I think the forest fires in LA. I can't tell you how many pitches I got about, could this happen here? Or is Vancouver ready? I mean, well, those are apples and oranges, really.
Yeah.
Some of those stories get told and some of them don't. It just, it all depends. But if you're pitching a journalist, it has to be interesting, be visual and see timely. Yeah, I think those are the three tickets.
Yeah. Do you put stories aside, kind of on the sit them on the burner for a day when
Yeah,
it's not so busy?
yeah, absolutely. We have I mean, not out in the field, not so much, but like our desk, our assignment hub. I mean, so if something comes through me, we just filter it through them, and then they can plug and play when days are a little less busy. In a typical day, I'm so busy trying to get the story I'm doing on the air that we kind of leave the planning to other people because it's logistically difficult to make TV. So it takes up a lot of my day.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that so we could share that with listeners. I don't think very many people know what goes into producing that. I don't know, 30 or 45-second segment. I don't know how long the standard segment is, but around that. Um, there's a lot that goes into it, from determining who the sources are, going onto the site, what's the visual, where are we going to get it, and gathering that b-roll video footage, doing the interviews, and then after that the job's only halfway done. So what after you are on site, you do those interviews, you gather the information, your camera colleague gathers those visuals. What happens after that to get it to that evening news spot?
Yeah, like as you say, we're halfway done then. So it's changed a little bit. No, it's changed drastically for me. It used to be we would gather all our visuals, gather all our interviews, and then we go back to the station, which is in Burnaby, and I would sit with an editor, and we would compile the story, compile all the clips, and then edit it into what we call a story, which is anywhere from a minute 45 to 2 minutes 15 seconds, depending on the day, and that takes the rule of thumb used to be 30 minutes for every minute of tape. Every minute of story takes about 30 minutes to edit. It used to be longer, but now it's a little shorter than that.
Okay.
So yeah, it takes a considerable amount of time to edit and get everything ready for my segment on the 6 o'clock news. But now that was before. But now since COVID, I do all my own editing.
Oh, wow.
So we gather at we you and I worked together in Port Coquitlam a couple of weeks ago,
Yes.
and so we shot that, got back to my house at about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then it's just all the tape, have a look at it, write a script, put all the clips on a timeline, put all the visuals together, make sure there's no terrible jump cuts or audio issues, and then I publish it at 5:30, and it goes on the air at 6 o'clock. So,
Wow. So you're doing a lot
yeah.
of production in addition to
Oh yeah,
the journalism.
yeah. It's I'm one of a few reporters at Global that edit now full time,
Okay.
and I actually quite enjoy it. It's it's been a new challenge for the last 4 or 5 years that I've quite enjoyed, and trying to make myself recession proof, layoff proof if I can. If I can do more things, I'm more useful to people.
Yeah, no, I don't think you have anything to worry about there, which leads into my next question. I know this will you might be apprehensive to talk about this one, but I've been on site with you before, Aaron, and people are a little bit starstruck with you, I find. And I think that's because, like we said, you've been in the industry a long time, you're a recognizable face, and you're on TV. And, when people see someone on TV for many years and trust them and watch the news, and they see them in person, that's a pretty cool experience for somebody, right? And they know very little of how the newsroom works, and they very rarely get to encounter that. So how does it feel when you kind of have that, people in the province come up to you and really feel like they've met a pretty cool dude? And also, do you ever get stopped when you're out with your families, picking oranges at the grocery store? And how's that?
All the time.
I figured.
It's always so strange for me to like. Trust me, nobody is starstruck by me. Middle-aged, a middle-aged guy. Nobody cares about me, but that is not true. I know that's not true. Um, eh, my kids get a real kick out of being stopped on the street. Actually, my younger one gets a kick out of it. My older one just thinks it's the height of embarrassment. She just can't
I
believe that people want to talk to me. Um, but and let me tell you, in strange places too. I have been stopped in Mexico. People
know.
knew who I was. I mean, a lot of Canadians go to Mexico, so that I guess that's not so surprising. But I was walking down the street in London, England once, and a guy came out of a bar and said, "Oh, it's Eric." So we had to go in and have a pint with him.
Oh, that's neat.
I got recognized in Hong Kong once. It's just the strangest places, but it happens quite often, and understandably, people invite us into their homes every night. It's their choice to watch our program. It's their choice to see us every night, and we interact with them in their living room, and so they have a personal connection with us, and it's just part and parcel of the job that people come up and say hi, or we love your work. We think you're we think you're a terrible human being, which has happened. um,
I doubt very often, but yes.
I I take it can be embarrassing or a little uncomfortable, but it's part of the job, and I'm happy to take a photo with someone, or
Mhm.
or shake someone's hand or say hi, and it's all good.
I
It
need to
comes
get
with the
my photo
territory.
taken with you next time, Aaron. I don't have a photo with you. Oh dear. I need to do that next time.
A crazy story. If we're with uh, a camera operator and me, they'll always ask, for some reason they'll always ask me to take the photo, and I don't know why. But I'm
Oh,
like, hey, why don't
really?
you get the camera guy to take the photo? Makes more sense.
Well, it gives you some hope that and I mean the numbers tell us that people clearly are watching TV news, but they're still very much interested in the personalities behind TV news and trusting them. So that is, I think, an indication of, and these aren't just people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. These are people in their 20s and 30s as well, younger demographics who are recognizing you. And so I suppose that's an indication that people are still very much invested in TV news and journalism.
Yeah,
You can
less
imagine.
so the younger people. I mean, it's certainly more people our age and older,
Yeah.
but it's young people in their 20s don't watch news anyway. They got better things to do. The viewers
Yeah.
kind of come later, I hope, anyway.
Yeah. Well, there was a woman in her 30s that was quite intrigued and interested in chatting with you. So I thought that was cool to see at the site the other day. So outside of your work as a journalist, so clearly, you need to have your own life with family, friends, and your own, hobbies outside of journalism. How do you spend your time when you're not working with Global? And what's your favorite thing to do in British Columbia?
Mostly these days, I just chase kids around,
Yep,
drive kids around,
I feel
do
ya.
all of that stuff. My 13-year-old fractured her knee skiing on the weekend, so I've been driving her
I
to and from school for the last few days. We're big outdoors people, and the mountains are, part of the reason I think I've always lived in BC is because the mountains are what I really enjoy. We ski all winter, we hike all summer. The kids we make the kids go on really long hikes in the summer. As long as I'm outside, I'm pretty happy.
yeah.
I grew up playing golf, and fishing, and riding my bike, and that's just stuck with me my whole life. So if I'm on a ski hill on a Saturday and on a hiking trail on a Sunday, that's a good weekend for me. So the more time I spend outside, the better.
Yeah, I can see that, especially being, in that technology through your job now, right? Really being off the technology would be kind of a priority, I'd imagine.
Geez, I put my phone down and leave it down.
Yes, yeah. I understand from your bio that organ transplant awareness is important to you and that you're an advocate in this space. Can you talk about why that is and a little bit about that?
Our My first child, my oldest daughter, Addison, was born with a congenital heart defect that required transplant. She was 4 weeks old and she was in heart failure, and the only option for her was a transplant, which she received. It's
Wow.
13 years ago now. And so she is alive because another family lost a baby, lost their child, and had the you know just had the grace to agree to organ donation. We thank that family every day. And so over the course of her life, we have made it our goal to raise awareness for organ donation as much as we can. Registering your intention to become an organ donor could literally save a life or several lives, and that's really important to us, to the point where my wife now is works in communications at BC Transplant. That's her whole life,
Oh,
is her whole job, her whole personal life and professional life is now in organ transplantation. So it's a big
wow.
part of our lives, and yeah, we're lucky. We have our daughter's alive because of the gift of life, and we always encourage people to go online and register their intentions. One of the myths we always like to try to bust is that everyone thinks there's a sticker on your driver's license that
Yes.
says you're an organ donor. That has not been true in 30 years. You
Okay.
have to
Because I
go
thought that.
online. Yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that used to be and is not anymore.
Okay.
So bctransplant.com is the website. I think it's register your decision. If you Google register your decision or BC Transplant or any of those catchphrases, you will go to the website and you can click through and make a decision and register your intention. And I mean, it's important to know that most people who pass away are not eligible to donate their organs. It's a very small fraction of people who actually go on to donate their organs. And so just registering your intention is the most important part of that, because it's just increases the opportunity for transplants to happen for people.
Wow. Okay. That's it's an amazing story about your daughter, and like you say, what a graceful thing for the family who donated. And I'm sure when you look at your daughter every day, that miracle is right there. So that's. I hope that people can click on the link and have a look at that. And remember, it's not just done automatically via your driver's license, which
Hmm.
I also thought it was. So now I know. Thank you very much. I'm going to go online and do that. Before I ask my last question, I wanted to pop one in here about aspiring journalists. There are still people like you were and like I was who really want to study journalism, but are perhaps apprehensive or nervous about the way that news is evolving. And they don't know what skills they should have if they do want to pursue it. Any advice for aspiring journalists who want to enter the field and who have these, fears or, nervous bits?
Hmm. If you catch me on a jaded day, I would say don't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so fraught with contraction and I don't know. It would be a tough racket to get into. But that being said, we talked about how important it is to have people willing to speak truth to power and to hold people accountable. So it is crucial that people do it. I think, I mean, it's obviously the new media is going to be the future of journalism, whether that be podcasts or online. The format is changing. I think that's clear. So the skill sets that are out there are going to have to be different,
Yeah.
and how we tell stories is going to be different, and how quickly sort of our institutions and our sources of power adopt those changes might be well, the catalyst to move in that direction. So, I mean, I see it at press conferences now. I mean, there's more sort of online outlets that are there, as you said, doing it all themselves. But those people are there, and they're doing the job. So those are the skills I would focus on. Is the Especially in TV news or broadcast news, is the technical skills that come along with the editorial skills. That's going to be critical going forward, because you have to be able to tell a story and produce a story and do it quickly and accurately.
What about writing?
Oh yeah, and writing. And actually, and that's the one thing that I've noticed in this new reality, is just how much people are reading. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, the newspapers are pretty much all online, but blogs and all of that stuff is all content that is written form, and without good writing, there is no journalism. So you have to be an excellent writer and be really nimble to make it all work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I when I see young journalists, I always encourage them. We need them to pursue their dreams of journalism, so that they can step into your shoes when you're, skiing all day or on the beach sometime in the far future. But I end every conversation, Aaron, with asking about my guest's favorite nonprofit. I know that organ transplant certainly might be one of those likely. Are there a couple of nonprofits that are close to your heart that you want people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, in the healthcare space, for sure, organ donation and transplant research. When Addison was born, there was nothing in terms of pediatric research. There's a lot of organizations that deal with socialization for kids who are ill, or send kids to summer camp, things like that. But there was nothing being done for research, trying to make lives better. Because one of the things about organ transplant that people also don't know is it's not a cure. It's just a manageable chronic health condition. Transplants come with a host of issues.
Right.
Medication that she has to take for the rest of her life that's toxic. It's really, it's not a cure. It's a treatment is the way
Right.
to describe it. So my wife and I founded an organization that raises money for research. It's called the Addison Fund, which is our local one. We've raised a whole bunch of money, but through the BC Transplant Research Foundation and the Vancouver General Hospital Foundation, we've transformed that money into research to make transplant patient lives better, especially pediatric patients. So we've even gone so far as to fund research study on giving vaccines to kids who have immune deficiency. So it's been really cool to see. We've actually made some research actually hit patients' lives, and we're pretty proud of that.
That's amazing. Where can people find out more about the Addison Fund, Aaron?
Yeah, Transplant Research Foundation of British Columbia is the website, and the Addison Fund is part of that. So I think either one of those searches should get you to the right page.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for being here, Aaron McArthur, news anchor, journalist, producer. Everything News with Global News BC. He's a veteran journalist here in the province, someone who has been a trusted source of news for many years and many years to come, I hope. Aaron, thank you for being here today and for sharing about your everyday and about journalism. Really appreciate you taking the time today, Aaron.
Yeah, great to chat. Be kind and truly connect. You are listening to Rachel Thexton Connects.